Hi again, everybody. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. This is the destination for high performers. We talk to people from different genres, just people doing really interesting things in their space, find out a little bit about what they're doing and their journey, and see if we can translate some of those into our own lives as well. So we talk to CEOs, we talk to lots of athletes, entrepreneurs, and again, just people doing really interesting things that we can learn from. And so just before we jump into the one today, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that we have a relationship with Epitome Sportswear. And the reason that it's a really good link for us is that it's not just focused on kind of high performance wear and things like that. It's just things that maybe if you're taking your child to their soccer game, just getting out and doing a nice fall hike, which a lot of people are doing right now, at least in where we are, it fits for that. The other thing that they do as well is that they give back to the community they serve as well. So they want to impact those communities, and they are working to impact the inequities in opportunity for girls and women in sport. And for that reason, a portion of the profits go directly to organizations and initiatives that support girls in sport. So you can check it out through our Instagram profile. You can see the connection through there, and there's a percentage code, or just go directly to Epitome Sportswear. That's EPITOME sportswear.com. And so, really happy to have Cynthia Arscott with us today. She's a kids mindfulness expert and CEO and founder of Goldminds. It's a new mindfulness story app for kids. It provides research-backed meditation, sleep stories, mindfulness classes to teach kids how to productively manage stress, regulate emotions, and sleep better. So, things that are super important. And before striking out as an entrepreneur, I know that she worked in sales and marketing for some top brands like Uber and Pepsi and things like that. So first of all, congratulations, Cynthia, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah. So before we even go too far into this, your app just launched recently, like very recently, and so maybe just how's that process been for you, even to kind of deal with all the stuff that goes with the big launch date.
Yes, it's very recent. It was 6 days ago.
Yeah.
So we are still within the first week, but it's been incredible. We've had an incredible response from our audience to joining the app. So we built a wait list of about 4,000 people before launching. And since then, within the last 6 days, we have about 3,000 people already on the app. So it's been pretty mind-blowing, but exciting. And also just incredible to see all of our team's hard work come to fruition. So we're working hard behind the scenes to, make improvements and add new things to the app and really keep up with all of the demand that's happened so far.
Yeah, well, that's awesome, and we'll go into kind of some of the stuff about that. But maybe just before we even go into even what happens with the app, I know that the story behind kind of how this became something that you're passionate about is a pretty personal journey from that standpoint. So why don't we track back to that a little bit first? Is just how did you get here? Like, what is it that really drives it drives you behind this?
Definitely. So I grew up as a quite an anxious child, and I was a competitive dancer. I went through a couple of different bullying situations while I was dancing, left me feeling like there was something wrong with me. And I can remember telling my mom that I didn't want to go to dance, that I had a stomach ache, and I was really just making things up because I was so unhappy there. This anxiety followed me into adulthood and got to the point where as a working adult, I was still feeling this anxiety and desperate for some relief. And I started meditating. So I'd meditate every single day. It was really challenging for me. I was definitely one of those people that would say, I can't turn my mind off. This isn't for me. But I pushed through and was really blown away by the results. I finally felt in control of my mind and I could really separate myself from my anxiety. So this became a tool that I was using. And it was in that moment that I really realized that this is what I needed as a young child who thought something was wrong with me. Obviously, when you're quite young like that, you can't articulate how you're feeling. You can't even tell your parents really how you're feeling because you don't even know.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to make that my mission going forward is teach kids that their emotions are normal. There's nothing wrong with you. And here's what you can do to productively manage them so that you can feel calmer and sleep better. So that was when I got certified to teach meditation and mindfulness, and Goldminds was born. It wasn't originally an app, it was originally school mindfulness programs.
Mm.
So it started in person
Yeah.
and evolved from there. And, a pandemic and me having
Yeah.
a child later, it evolved into an on-demand platform, which then evolved into this app.
Wow. And you mentioned it there about the kind of impact of the pandemic, which probably also brought this to the forefront even more. And I would assume, like, is that something that do you see that? Because even that impact continues for a long time after, because people live through that time and kids live through that time. Do you see that as being something that's really kind of done a shift and made this more important, I guess?
The conversation has definitely shifted. You're so right on that. Before, when I first started, it was right before the pandemic, and I remember explaining to people this idea. I'm going to teach kids mindfulness and meditation, and they were like, "What?" Like it was kind of just a nice to have, not a need to have. I think everybody always thought kids are fine, they're resilient, they don't experience stress. Their lives are so easy, but we know better now. And I really do think that the pandemic brought to light just how real anxiety is in children, among other things.
Yeah.
So it definitely kept the conversation going and it helped bring the problem to light. So now, however many years later we are, it's a conversation that people are really willing to have, and a lot of schools are incorporating mindfulness already. So it's something that parents are very familiar with within the curriculums at school. So it's definitely been helpful for us to be able to articulate our story and our mission.
Yeah, and why do you think, like, why is it important, I guess, because there are lots of people that would listen to our podcast, and we actually talk about this stuff all the time for adults and how it's becoming a lot more accepted, as you were saying, and not just accepted, but actually become part of what people do to manage themselves. Um, why do you think it's so important for younger people to learn these skills early? Because, people, I think of people my age would never have kind of, they're getting exposed to this only much later in life. Does it
Mhm.
make a difference that you have some of that connection early in life and learn the skills before you maybe even need them in the same way when you're older?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about when you teach a child a second or a third language, you do it when they're really young and they pick it up like a sponge. And that's the same reason why you'd want to teach mindfulness when they're really, really young. Because as we've gotten older, if you say meditation to somebody, there's instantly this like bias, judgment that comes up. Oh, what are you talking about? And, putting some sort of label on it. Kids have no bias, they have no judgment. They are a clean slate, and you can teach them something like mindfulness or meditation and they're excited about it. They think it's cool. And, it's much easier to teach a child this skill than it is to teach somebody when they're older. It's difficult to teach an old dog new tricks. We know that. We have so much bias. So yes, it's really important to teach this to kids because they can pick it up so quickly. And even if they're not experiencing something particularly stressful in their lives, they at least have the tools to bring out of their toolbox when they are 25 and they've lost their job or they go through a breakup or whatever difficult situation that comes up. Stress is inevitable, heartbreak is inevitable. And at least if we give kids these skills while they're young, they can pull them out whenever they need them, as opposed to having no skills and going down more destructive paths to be
Yeah,
able to regulate and manage their stress.
yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about what, for those people who maybe haven't looked at an app similar to this, and how is, what makes yours special, especially considering it's aimed at children?
Yeah, I remember when I first started a couple years ago, somebody said to me, "So are you going to be like the Headspace but for kids?" And at the time, I was like, "Oh no, I don't think so." And then now I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what we are doing."
Yeah,
So that's, I guess, the best comparison for adults. But it's essentially, I use the word mindfulness because it's a bit more, it's a lot easier for people to understand, and it again leads to less bias and judgment in the world of mindfulness and meditation. But it's essentially a mindfulness story app. So if you think about the way that you would read stories to your children before bed, you would use these stories either in addition to or to replace stories. So, for example, how I use it in my household, I have a 2-year-old and he takes a lot of support to fall asleep. He's not one of those unicorn children that just wants to go to sleep all the time. He'd rather just stay awake and play all day. So putting him to sleep is a challenge. So nap time, we have different nap time story tracks. So essentially they're calming, soothing tracks. They're actually me. I'm the voice on the app as a teacher. So obviously he loves that. But
Yeah.
I tell different age appropriate stories that are done very slowly, that incorporate mindfulness techniques like using your five senses and taking deep breaths. And there's calming frequency music in the background as well that really sets the tone for sleep. And kids are usually falling asleep by the end of the track or shortly after. You can also use it in your bedtime routine, which is the most common and most popular way, because guess what? All parents want is for their kids to unwind and fall asleep a little bit easier, myself included. So as a part of our bedtime routine, we'll read him a couple of books, we'll play one of the stories, and they're audio only. So the child's not looking at a screen, they're just listening. And it encourages them to fall asleep. So that's really how it's used. And the best feedback that we get is that people or kids are falling asleep really quickly. And that's all we want as parents. So that's our goal.
Yeah, yeah. I maybe what's that like getting that? I mean, because you are getting feedback now, I'm sure, because now you're actually like people are using it. They're starting to kind of, I'm sure, give you some idea from that. And how gratifying is that? Not just the fact that it's okay, it's working the way we wanted it to, and some of those things, but I'm sure over time you'll probably also hear, much larger stories about, kids that maybe have already kind of had anxiety and some of those things, and this being able to impact that even in your practice before. Has that driven what you do, and do you get that kind of feedback?
Yes, especially right now with back to school, with people joining the app, kids are anxious, nervous to be going back to school, entering different classrooms. Maybe the family has moved. And I'm already getting stories from parents that'll say, my child was really anxious to go to school, but we played one of these stories on the way to school and it calmed them down, or we played it when they got home and they already said they feel so much better.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome to get that feedback. And that is my number one goal, is to help with reducing stress and anxiety. Like I was a very fear-filled sleeper. I hated to sleep by myself and I needed something to calm me down. I thought I just had to figure it out myself and didn't know how. So yeah, those stories are really driving us forward, and we're getting lots of great feedback. We're also getting lots of constructive feedback, which is to be expected. And I love that because that's how we serve our community and that's how we make it better for them.
Yeah, yeah. And so maybe I'll jump into something that's also about you. You were in very kind of corporate roles before. This is probably a big leap for you, even, and probably even caused anxiety for you and things like that. What's that been like to move from kind of doing more corporate roles to being a pure entrepreneur?
It's definitely been a shift. But I always knew that entrepreneurship was for me. I used to have a notepad in my phone where while I was working at these corporate jobs, I would write down different business ideas. None of them ever came to fruition because I wasn't passionate about any of them. And this one, purely came out of passion, which was what made it so easy for me to make the shift. But the shift itself is challenging. I think I always say, like, having a business is the best thing that ever happened to me, but it's the hardest thing that ever happened to me because yeah, you don't have anybody telling you what to do. You don't have anybody guiding you. It's just you. You have to figure it all out yourself. And I wish that I knew how long it was going to take to figure it out. And don't get me wrong, people told me it was going to take a long time, but for some reason, I think we all think we're special and we can do it faster. I
Yeah,
definitely thought that. I was like, oh, I'll do it in 2 years. I'll figure it out. And it didn't. It took me longer. Like it took me 3, 4 years to really figure out what the recipe of my business was.
yeah,
So it's definitely been a challenge, but as a parent to a 2-year-old as well, I really do appreciate the flexibility because I had a really hard time sitting in an office from, whatever time to whatever time and feeling like
yeah,
I had to put on this show when I knew that I could still work really hard and still make a lot of impact at the company, but in my own time. So I really do appreciate that side of things from entrepreneurship, but
yeah,
definitely a transition. I
yeah,
agree with you.
yeah. And I guess you've been in technology and stuff before. So just from the perspective of, did you have to go out and get a whole bunch of investment, or were you able to kind of do most of this, or how did that work for you in setting this up?
Yeah, so I've bootstrapped this business myself through savings, through revenue we brought in, and through grants. It's been challenging. doing it that way, but and who knows how long we'll keep it that way, but I do like holding on to the control
Yeah.
for now anyways, for as long as possible. And yeah, I definitely think it's taken a little longer because of that, but that's just the way that's worked for us. But yeah, I think that the grants that are out there are incredible. I apply to every single one of them that I can, and I've been lucky enough to win 3 or 4 of them, which have truly funded this business. And then on top of that, I've brought a CTO onto our team as well, and a chief social officer as well. So I have people on the team that are really helping me build and grow this
Yeah.
quicker, which has been
Yeah.
lovely because I can't do this myself. And I really did try to do it by myself for as long as I possibly could. But once the technology side of things came in, I was like, okay, I'm really good at selling and marketing. That's what I
Yep.
did in previous roles, but I've never built an app before.
Yeah.
So it was great to be able to test out a beta app with a white labeled software essentially
Yeah.
for a while, and then now having a CTO to build the app for us from scratch and really be that person, that go-to person on our team to solve problems, to build things, to add features has been incredible, and I couldn't do it without him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've already talked about it. It's kind of nice because you are a mom and you're having, you've got a youngster at home. How do you find, I mean, balancing all of those things when you've got, obviously this is busy for you right now and very busy for you probably right now, but do you have like, how's that worked for you to be able to kind of balance being a busy mom and, doing kind of all of the stuff that comes along with this?
It's been challenging. I didn't take a mat leave,
Yeah.
which was very challenging. There was no real way for me to take a mat leave because I was by myself doing
Yeah.
this about 2 years ago. And I think in some senses, it gave me a lot of purpose and a lot of drive to keep pushing forward because now I was doing this for my family and for my son and not just for myself.
Yeah.
But the first year of his life was incredibly challenging for me and trying to balance it all. And I quickly realized how important having a village, so to speak, is, and not everybody has that. And I was lucky enough to have my parents really close by, and I could not have done it without their help. My parents would watch my son for me while I would do work for a couple hours a day here and there. It wasn't for very long. It might have just been 2 or 3 hours, but even that just was enough to keep us going in the first year of my son's life. And since then, still my mom watches my son multiple times a week for me, and I get so much help from her and from my dad as well. So I really couldn't be doing it without them. I actually don't know where I would be where
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
business would be without that. But
Yeah.
it's definitely been very challenging. Even my husband supporting me because I'm not paying myself, so for us to have those difficult conversations to say, hey, like, I know where I want this to go, I know that it's going there, can we make this work? He's been incredible at supporting me. We figured it all out, and here we
Yeah.
are launching, and it's been awesome, and
Yeah.
gotten some incredible feedback. So it never came without its sacrifices or without its challenges, but
Yeah.
just grateful to have kept going and kept pushing through and kept jumping through all of the hurdles that have been thrown my way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure it's created some additional resilience that you need to be able to go through this. But it is important to kind of throw out there that how much community is important, especially for. And I would say it's I mean there are other challenges for women entrepreneurs, and I mean that it's a reality that unfortunately though it's not a level playing field sometimes that to be able to
Mhm.
do that. So it's important to get that out there that this is there's extra resilience I'm sure that you've built that some others don't have to. So
Mhm.
um, and maybe just that's one thing is that you mentioned you have goals, you have to kind of do that kind of stuff. Are you a write down goals kind of person when you go through this and just kind of for the rest of your life, or is it you take things as you go and kind of what's your approach there?
I'm definitely a big goal setter. That's something that I've always loved doing multiple times a year. And my husband and I do this together as well, which is nice to have somebody to share these goals with and talk about. So I usually look at my life in different buckets. You can break them down however you want, but you could break it down your personal life, your friendships, your relationships, your working life, there's multiple ways that you could look at it. And I try to look at each of the buckets. I have usually about 5 of them, and I try to set a goal in each of them to achieve. What I've learned though, since goal setting, is you can decide what you want, but you can't decide when you're going to get it. And you actually can't decide how you're going to get it either. You can have a general timeline that you can work towards, and you can also have action items to get there. But what I've realized is I've spent so much time trying to determine the how and the when that it caused me more stress than good. So over the last year, I've actually focused more on the what and getting crystal clear on what it is that I want. And I do lots of visualizations for that. So I used to write it all down, and I still do occasionally, but now it's more visualization. And I love Dr. Joe Dispenza for this because he's got some incredible meditations that help you visualize exactly what you want. Because I think people have these goals, but they don't know exactly what it looks like. So, if you want to have, for me, I want to have an app that Goldminds, I want it to be a household name. I want families to be using this. I want it to be a staple in their bedtime routine. What does that look like? How does it feel for that to be a reality? What am I doing every day? What am I working on? What is our community feeling like? And what kind of comments are they leaving for me? And really visualizing that, feeling the emotion of how that feels in my body. And that helps me to take steps forward to get that goal achieved. And that's what I focused on over the last year. And I actually think that that's been the best and most successful goal setting that I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah, no, really, really interesting because it's I think a different approach, but probably one that, yeah, it's probably a little more gratifying, I would assume too, in many ways. So, um, and over the next little while, how do what do you want to kind of see? I mean, I know it's early, but what do you see kind of that what is the next year gonna look like for your app and for you? Do you have a clear picture on what you want to see happen over the next little while?
In my mind, I do. I'm also open to it changing based on how our community responds. I've always, as Goldminds has pivoted and turned over the last couple of years, I've always
Yeah.
been open to change and feedback. But I really do visualize this app being, the meditation slash mindfulness app for kids out there that helps kids relax, unwind, and fall asleep.
Yeah.
I, of course, am super focused on growing our user base, but I'm also really focused on community and making this app valuable each and every month. So it's not just something you're subscribing to and you're like, wait, why am I subscribed to this again? I want it to be something that's like, this works for my family. I use it every single day in some capacity. And this app is always adding new stories, new challenges, new features. So we do definitely have a roadmap of priorities over the next year, but my main goal is to make it community focused. I really want this app to be designed and built through the ideas of our community.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. And you personally, just as you've went through this, you mentioned how and I think any entrepreneur, you have to learn a lot. You have to kind of lean on other people. But do you have do you have specific mentors that you kind of look to, or is it you've got a whole bunch of people that you kind of pick up pieces from? How does that work for you personally?
I'm definitely one of those people that will reach out to anybody. It must be the the
Yeah,
ex-salesperson in me. I can reach out to anybody and ask for maybe a phone call or some advice. I love doing that for very specific questions that I have, somebody that's already done it. So I'll definitely do that. When I go to networking events, I usually just like go right to the speaker and like talk to them and try to pick their brain. But generally speaking, I do have a couple of key people in my life that are entrepreneurs and have been very successful, that have been mentors to me. So, one who's been in business for 15 years in the kids space and has been incredibly successful. I go to her all the time, and she's been pivotal in me starting this business. And, if I'm ever having a difficult problem or even just need a mindset reframe, she's that person I can call, and I'm grateful for that. And then I
yeah,
also have other friends that I worked with at Uber, because Uber really launched a ton of entrepreneurs after people had left that company. And so I'm still very close with a number of people who have left Uber and those that have started businesses. And so they have mentored me as well, which has been awesome to keep those connections.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Having that community definitely helps for sure. So, you You mentioned, so one of the things that we always do with any guest is be able to kind of have a couple of tips we can leave. There's lots of things that I'm sure people have taken away already today. One of those things that you mentioned is community and how, so whether it's an app like yours or almost any initiative anymore, there is a component where it's how do you build that community? How do you people engaged and feel connected? From your experience, both with the app and what you've experienced before, do you have a couple of tips on how do you do that? Like some people are probably thinking of, how do I even kind of start to build some kind of community around what it is that I'm doing?
What I found with community is that the best way to build it is by sharing all kinds of things that you don't want to share. And what I mean by that is we're so used to this culture of sharing the highlight reel. Look at this award I won. Look at the school I got into. Look at this business I started. But what I started to realize is people really started to resonate with me and with Goldminds when I started sharing the actual truth behind why I started it. I got bullied. I experienced anxiety. I am less than perfect. I started this business to create impact because this is what I needed as a little girl. And not only that story, but also like the behind the scenes of what goes into building this business. It's not, I'm not in this like incredible, beautiful, like San Francisco tech office. Like, no, I'm just at home. I have my son's downstairs and this is how I'm building it. And I think that people really love to see that. It took a while to feel comfortable with that because I think we want people to take us seriously. And we think that they're not going to take us seriously if we show them the behind the scenes of our actual life. But it's actually the opposite. I've showed on Instagram and sometimes on LinkedIn the difficulties of starting a business, the ways that I failed, what the day-to-day looks like, the problems we're having. And I think that people appreciate that a lot more. Like the day before we were supposed to launch our app last Monday, so it would have been a week ago today.
Yeah.
Um, our app got rejected from the App Store the day before. So
Wow.
that was good. Like, and
Yeah.
in those moments, I'm like, okay, I could catastrophize this, or I could actually just say like, okay, well, that's too bad. Like,
Yeah.
this happens. Like, let's just be open and honest and share that with our community, and we'll launch tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
nobody really cares about this exact launch day except for me, I think. So things like that, that I just think it's really important to be raw and open with your community. And over time, the people that resonate with you will stick around, and the people that don't won't. And that's okay because they're not a part of your community.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is funny how you say that we're kind of used to always sharing all this great stuff and everything, but the reality, and I do think that again, this is another thing with the pandemic. I mean, people weren't used to people being very open about, I'm in the middle of all this other stuff happening in our lives, and unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, that kind of all happened to everybody during that time, and it's kind of created something where people feel a little more open to sharing some of those things, which is great and does create a lot more kind of connection with people. Um, so if people are now, it's approved, it's in App Store now, and all of those things.
Yes.
So tell everybody if they want to, download it, check it out, and obviously use it. What are some of the best ways of doing that, and then maybe following you and what's happening with Goldminds as well?
Yes, so the app is approved on the Apple App Store. Android is coming hopefully within the next month. But if you go on the Apple App Store and search Gold Minds, Minds,
Yes.
you'll be able to find it on there, and you can download it and start a 7-day free trial, or you can follow us on Instagram at Gold Minds app. And you can always DM us on there. It's just me. I'm the one answering. So you can DM me and ask me. I don't have a team doing that. It's
Yeah.
me. So you can DM me and ask me any questions.
Cool. Well, what we'll do as well is we'll put that in the show notes. So if you missed it, just go into the show notes and be able to click through. And if you haven't hit subscribe on the podcast, do that now because we have great people every week, just like Cynthia. So, again, thank you for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it and shared some really cool stuff. So thanks for that.
Thanks so much for having me. That was fun.
All right. And everybody else, we will talk again soon on Big Idea, Big Moves.